Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. Going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days for today's video. That's going to take us to around the 12th of January. So we're heading into the second week of the month, well truly, with a week 10-day video update time frame. We'll be able to extend beyond that the extended GFS and ECM ensembles running to around a couple of weeks. Having a look at Beijing Climate Centre today for the next 40 days, and that's going to take us into the beginning of February. So I'll get back to you very shortly, just to say that the gas office January month-end forecast is going to be released on Saturday morning. That'll be the first video up on Saturday. Right, so begin with Central England temperature. Of course, we confirmed yesterday that the CT for December came out at 5.8. So we confirmed that in the New Year's Day video. They've switched over now to the 2020 data. So all we have for the CT page at Hadley at the moment is January showing up as 5.8, an anomaly of over 2 degrees above average provisional to the 1st of January. So it's a very mild New Year's Day this year, over 2 degrees above average, and it's going to stay pretty mild, I think, certainly for the next week to 10 days. So we could be in for a very, very mild first half to January, actually. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we was. This is the CT page at Gas Office. I thought I'd just talk you through some of the January data. So if we come down here, we can see what our averages are, scrolling down all the way through the centuries of a decade. Of course, CT goes back to 1659. It's the longest and most consistent temperature record anywhere on Earth. But of course, the further back you go, the more unreliable it gets. So this is the CT's averages for 61 to 1990 and 81 to 2010. So for January, the 61 to 1990 average is 3.8. For 81 to 2010, the January average is 4.4. 4.4 for January with 81 to 2010. That's the more modern average. The 61 to 1990 average, of course, is a colder temperature average because it does encompass a very cold decade, abnormally cold decade of the 1960s, which had loads of cold winters and pretty poor summers as well. So 81 to 2010 is more reflective of the sort of climate we're in at the moment, and 61 to 1990 is a little bit skewed onto the colder side. So looking at some past Januaries, let's scroll that back up. Looking at some past Januaries, so 2019 came out with January CT at 4.0. That wasn't too far from average, actually. It's a little bit below average even for 81 to 2010. It was near normal for 61 to 1990. Our last properly cold January, quite some time ago now, was back in 2010, which had an anomaly, which had a CT of 1.4. That's our last properly cold January. Really, that's a genuinely cold and wintry month, especially the first half of January 2010. Very mild pair of Januaries there, 2008, 2007, 6.6 and 7.0. We actually haven't had an exceptionally mild January so far this decade. So our last exceptionally mild January, I suppose, was that one, 2007, coming out at 7.0, although 2008 was also very mild. But you'll notice through the last decade, or started a new decade now, we have 2011 at 3.7, 2012 at 5.4, 2013 at 3.5, 2014 5.7, 2015 at 4.4, 2016 5.4, 2017 4.0, 2018 5.3, and 2019 4.0. So we are probably due a very mild January, actually, and this could be, it's very early days, of course, to say that, it's only the 2nd of January, but this could be the January that we're due for a very, very mild month. The warmest January on record was a very long time ago, actually, in terms of the CT. So let's go all the way back up through the decades, and we come to the early part of the 20th century, and the warmest January on record is actually way back in 1916. With a CT then of 7.5. That is the warmest January on record. And all of the warm winters that we've had since like the end of the 1980s all the mild winters that we've had, we haven't beaten January 1916. Could that January record be under threat this year? It's a little bit early to say that, but certainly I think the first half of January 2020, I should say, there's the first slip for going into the new year. Certainly the first half of January 2020 is looking very, very mild now, I think. It wasn't that long after 1916. It was another extremely mild January in 1921 as well. Of course, the 60s have a lot of cold winters, particularly 1963, and that January has a CT of -2.1. Exceptionally cold, and of course that's part of the coldest winter, 62-63, since 1740. And the last time we had a negative CT for January, very long time ago again, now was in 1979. Part of the winter of discontent, of course. So that one comes out with a CT of -0.4. We're definitely not going to be seeing anything cold like that for January 2020. I think it's going to be a milder than average month already. I think that's looking highly likely. Could turn out to be an exceptionally mild month as well. I won't say a record-breaking month. I'm not going to talk about breaking records yet. Let's see where we are in 2 or 3 weeks' time. But certainly, I'm going to show you the data in a moment. Certainly, there's absolutely no sign of anything particularly cold coming up in the next couple of weeks. So the first half of January 2020 is going to be a very, very mild month indeed. So there we go. I thought you'd appreciate having a quick look at the stats for January, so we know what we're looking for in the next few weeks as we go through this month of January 2020. Right, these are the 500 millibar high anomaly flowcharts from Penn State University for the next 7 to 10 days. We've got the ECMWF on the top and the GFS is on the bottom. So 500 millibars is an area in the atmosphere. High pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to above average heights, that's high pressure. Blue extrapolates to below average heights, that's low pressure. These are mean flowcharts for the 7 to 10 day time frame. This will take us to around the 12th of January. We can see that in the 7 to 10 day time frame of the ECM, we're looking very mild and westerly and Atlantic driven. Low pressure is up towards Greenland and Iceland. High pressure is sitting to the south of the UK across much of Western Europe, and we're dragging up that very mild long fetch west or southwesterly winds. So absolutely nothing cold here there whatsoever. That is all Atlantic driven, zonal and westerly stuff. The ECMWF looks like this. So again, we've got high pressure sitting to our south, ridging in from the Azores into Western and Southern Europe. Low pressure, let's change the colour again. Low pressure is up to the north, quite a deep area of low pressure, a bit deep with the GFS when it is for the ECM, up to the north of Scotland. Again, strong westerly winds coming across the Atlantic into Europe. It doesn't get much more zonal than that. That's exceptionally zonal conditions. And it could be a bit unsettled, particularly for northern parts of the country, quite wet. But the upshot is, temperature-wise, it would be very, very mild indeed in that situation. So mild and Atlantic-driven for the next week to 10 days. These are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles. So the next couple of weeks, we're looking at Edinburgh today. So the red line is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Edinburgh. We're starting off significantly milder than average at the moment. Going to get a little bit of a cooler snap. I'm not going to say a colder snap now. It's been downgraded quite a bit. But we're going to get a little bit of a cooler snap Friday through to Saturday. But by the early part of next week, we're back into mild or very mild conditions. Bit of a zonal sine wave showing up here as well. So we've got warmer sectors and cooler sectors and warmer sectors and cooler sectors, warmer sectors, cooler sectors alternating. So that tells us we're very much into a zonal pattern until we get a little bit later on. This period just here, and then we lose that zonal sine wave to some degree. But you'll see even then overall trending above average. The white line is the ensemble means. That's taking each one of those individual lines of spaghetti and creating a mean line, and you'll see that is above the red line into the second week of January, in fact even into the second half of January, it's still looking overall milder than average. Of course, there are a few colder outliers. The GFS operational run is a little bit on the colder side, but I'm going to show you in a moment. But most of the ensemble members are up here, continuing therefore to look relatively mild, certainly through the first half of January. Confirmed by the temperature anomaly from the 2nd to the 10th of January, above average for the UK, for Ireland, through most parts of Europe. Very, very mild across Scandinavia, much, much milder than average up there, and also for western parts of Russia. Portugal looks a little bit cooler than average. Down in the southeast corner, it looks like Greece and Turkey are a little on the colder than average side as well, but most parts of Europe are milder than average. The UK is included in that. Precipitation is beginning to turn more unsettled now as well, so still drier than average for England and Wales from the 2nd to the 10th of January, but for Scotland and Northern Ireland actually going a little bit wetter than average, and these may trend a little bit wetter still over the next few days. That's how the GFS is looking. Excuse me, that's how the GFS is looking for Sunday. So, as only as Sunday, we're reintroducing that westerly wind off the Atlantic. So that's why I say that the cold snap that we was expecting this weekend has been downgraded. It's barely more than a few hours of cooler conditions, and then those mild west-southwest winds are wafting back in as early as Sunday. As we go into the early part of next week, well then low pressure begins to move in off the Atlantic, turning more unsettled, particularly for the north and west, a little bit less so for the south-southeast, but you'll see how these southwesterlies are pumping up the air from the Azores. We've got the Azores, of course, down here, and that's where the air is coming from, wafting up into the west of Europe. It's a long fetch west-southwesterly, and it will be dragging up very mild conditions through the middle part of next week. Into the more extended range, that's how we're looking again. So high pressure centering over Germany and Poland then. Low pressure out towards Greenland, Iceland. Again, we're bringing up these west-southwest winds. So it's very mild up to day 10, which is the 12th of January. Either mild or potentially very mild. There may be the odd days, but that's exceptionally mild. What we certainly aren't seeing any signs of, though, is anything particularly cold. This is looking like a very, very mild first half to January. Into the more extended range, well, then the jet stream just begins to dig southwards a little bit, so we start to pull some cooler air in from the northern Atlantic. Nothing to get excited about, but it does turn a little bit cooler there. But as we saw on the GFS ensemble for Edinburgh, actually not all that well supported, so let's go back to that. You can see that the green line is not all that well supported. By the way, precipitation-wise, with the ensemble, relatively dry for the next few days, and then getting more unsettled as we move into the second week of January. Back to the generic chart. So that's GFS for Thursday, 16th of January, into the second half of the month now. Trying to build up a little bit of high pressure to the north of Scotland, but the days on that are numbered. Actually, it slips south into Germany, and we're going back into those west-southwesterlies yet again. GM looks like that. So for Sunday, mild or very mild air coming around the top of the high pressure into the northern part of the country. Perhaps still a little bit on the chilly side for England and Wales, with chance of some frost. But early next week, we just go into unsettled conditions again. Low pressure continues driving off the Atlantic through the course of next week, and all the time we're dragging up those winds from the central Atlantic, so it is going very, very mild. We can say that with very definitive certainty. Very mild conditions through today 10, which is Sunday the 12th of January. How many times have I said mild in this video, I wonder? That's how the ECM is looking. Again, mild west-southwesterlies on Sunday. High pressure down across England and Wales. Could give us a frost. Might give us a frost over the weekend. As we go into the early part of next week, we're into those west-southwesterlies, and they continue through the course of next week. Might go a little bit stormy through the middle part of next week, but all the time the winds are either west or southwest, so temperatures will be staying mild or very mild generally. That's how we look as we end the ECM run at day 10, which is Sunday, 12th of January. Again, high pressure is centred just to our south-southeast. Low pressure is out to the northwest. We continue to draw up mild or even very mild southwesterly winds. These are the options are on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10 from the Icelandic Met Office. This gets us to the 12th of January. Low pressure is out to the northwest with these 29. Low pressure out to the northwest, high pressure to the southeast. We're dragging up a southwesterly, so that's most unsettled for the north, driest for the south, and very mild, of course. 22 members of BCM ensembles, which includes the control and the operational run. The operational run we was just looking at, just a little bit more influence from high pressure building up from the south. That's slightly drier and still generally quite mild as well with that option. In 2 weeks' time, these are the options that we've got. So we've got 27 members of the ECM ensembles. Gets us to the 17th of January, by the way. 27 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure out to our west, high pressure to our east. So that's mild, bring winds up from the south or southwest. And most of our conditions would be in the west. And they have 24 members of the ECM ensembles, which does include the control run, but takes a high pressure a bit further north. So this is a colder scenario setting up for the second half of January. High pressure then is across southern parts of Scandinavia and will probably be bringing in an easterly wind. So that would be colder, but it's near a 50-50 split really in the ECM ensembles between the colder option there and the mild option continuing there, 27 versus 24. So not quite 50-50, but very nearly 50-50. It's actually 52% to 52, let's get rid of that. It's actually 52.9%, so 53% versus 47% in favour of a milder outcome. As the days have gone along, though, this idea of generating the high pressure into, which is the mild high, it's a high that's starting off to our south and helping to drag up those southwest winds. This idea that that high becomes a Scandinavian high, or a southern Scandinavian high anyway, and potentially brings in something a bit colder from the east in the middle part of January. As the days have gone along, that idea within the ECM ensembles has grown a little bit. So there's still the possibility that in the middle part of January and into the second half of the month could go colder, probably mostly from frost and fog. This isn't a true sort of Siberian high. This is a high pressure that ridges up from the south and settles over Scandinavia. So the air wouldn't be desperately cold with it, but of course it would be a lot colder than southwesterlies or westerlies, and it will certainly be colder to generate frost, potentially even wintry showers in the east. But we'll just have to wait and see about that. I'm a bit dubious about whether that will come off, but we shall see. Finally, the Beijing Climate Centre, so these are 500 millibar heights broken down into 10-day periods. The first 10-day period is going to take us from the 1st through to the 10th of January. The coming 10 days with low pressure to our north, high pressure over to the south of the country, bringing up those west-southwesterly winds, looks generally quite mild for the first 10 days of January. The next 10-day period is going to be the 11th to the 20th of January, low pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic, high pressure to the south. If you come over here to the southeast, well, centred over the Alps, really dragging up long southwesterlies. That is very mild again. And go through to the next 10-day period, which will be the 21st to the 30th of January. Low pressure again up to our north, high pressure down to our southwest, bringing in the west-southwest. You could be a little bit more unsettled there, but still on the mild or very mild side. And then finally, next 10-day period, going from the 31st of January to the 9th of February. Low pressure then is coming in off the Atlantic, looking more unsettled, but still looking, you've guessed it, generally on the mild side. So that's a pretty grim update. If anybody wants cold weather during January, if you want a bit of snow, absolutely no sign of it whatsoever through the first half of the month. And as I said in yesterday's video, the way the sea survey temperature anomalies have set up in the Pacific and the Atlantic, it looks like this is going to be a mild winter now, I have to say. And I think we can already say that the Gauss Weather's winter forecast is a bust. It's not going to be as cold as we thought it might be. And the warning signs were there when I did the forecast, actually. I could see from the ocean setup that, the Atlantic and Pacific just weren't really conducive for a cold winter. But I thought there might be other factors that could sort of come into play and help us get some colder interludes anyway. But we're not even getting those at the moment. So it's grim old times for the winter forecast. It's grim old times for anybody who wants anything cold and wintry as well. Of course, we might get a little cold snap coming along unexpectedly at some point, so don't give up completely if you're waiting for some cold weather. But at the moment, mild really is ruling the roost and is going to certainly through the first half of January. It'll be interesting to see how mild the central temperature is by the time we get to the middle of the month. I think we could have a very impressively large deviation on the warm side. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Right, well, that's it for now. Tomorrow, we're going to have JMA Friday, the first JMA Friday of 2020, of course, and we'll have a week 10-day video update as well. January month-ahead forecast will be the first video up on Saturday. That's all for now, though, and thanks for watching.